I stood in the backyard of my uncle's estate on the 4th of July, watching my brother accept congratulations for a business he didn't build when someone asked him how he came up with the original concept. He smiled that easy smile he'd perfected over the years, and said it came to him during a late-night brainstorming session. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly you'd think he'd been practicing it for months. Maybe he had. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees, casting dappled shadows across the lawn where 3 generations of the Morrison family had gathered. Tables were laden with food, children ran through sprinklers, adults held cold drinks and warm conversations. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. It felt like standing on glass. My brother stood near the gazebo, surrounded by cousins and uncles who hung on his every word. He gestured broadly as he described the journey of building Morrison Analytics from the ground up. Every milestone he mentioned was something I had done. Every challenge he described overcoming was one I had solved alone in my apartment at 2 in the morning while he was out networking at bars. I felt my aunt's hand on my shoulder. She meant it kindly, but it felt like being held in place. Like she knew if she let go, I might walk over there and shatter the illusion everyone seemed so eager to believe. For those of you listening, I always wonder where you are when you hear stories like this. Maybe you're cooking dinner, or driving to work, or folding laundry in a quiet house. When this moment happened to me, I was standing 30 feet from my own truth being told by someone else's mouth. I'd love to know where you're hearing this. Somehow sharing these moments makes them feel less isolating. My brother's voice carried across the lawn. He was talking about our first major client, the retail chain that had signed a 6-figure contract. He described the pitch meeting in vivid detail. The only problem was he hadn't been at that meeting. I had, alone, with a laptop that kept overheating and a presentation I'd revised 17 times the night before. Someone asked about the proprietary algorithm that made Morrison Analytics different from competitors. My brother launched into an explanation using terms he'd clearly memorized but didn't fully understand. He got the technical details wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, just wrong enough that anyone who actually understood the technology would notice. I noticed. My jaw clenched. My mother appeared beside me carrying a pitcher of lemonade. She topped off my glass, even though it was still full. "Your brother is doing so well," she said softly. "Isn't it wonderful to see him thriving?" I looked at her carefully, trying to decide if the question was innocent or pointed. Her face gave nothing away. She'd spent 30 years perfecting that expression, the one that said everything was fine and always would be as long as everyone played their assigned roles. The thing about family gatherings is they have their own gravity. Their own rules. Growing up, I learned that keeping the peace mattered more than telling the truth. That making others comfortable was more important than being comfortable yourself. That some lies were acceptable if they made the story prettier. I had spent 28 years following those rules. 28 years making myself smaller so others could feel bigger. 28 years believing that if I just worked hard enough, eventually someone would notice. Someone would say my name. Someone would acknowledge that I existed as more than supporting cast in someone else's story. My brother raised his beer in a toast. "To family," he said. "To the people who believed in me, when I was just a guy with an idea and a dream." The crowd echoed the sentiment. Glasses clinked, people smiled. My chest felt tight like someone had wrapped wire around my ribs and was slowly pulling it tighter. I didn't interrupt. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked away from my aunt's gentle hand and made my way toward the house. No one noticed. They were too busy celebrating a fiction. Inside my uncle's study, I closed the door and leaned against it. The room was quiet, dark wood and leather furniture. Shelves lined with books that had never been opened. It smelled like cigar smoke and old money. Through the window I could see the party continuing. My brother was now talking to my grandfather. I watched the old man clap him on the shoulder with pride. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd been compiling for 6 months. Documents, emails, time-stamped files, every piece of evidence proving that Morrison Analytics was mine. That every line of code, every client relationship, every strategy had originated with me. That my brother was nothing more than a face. A name. A performance. I had not planned to use these documents today. I had hoped I wouldn't need to. I had believed naively that eventually the truth would surface on its own. That someone would ask the right question, and my brother would stumble. That reality would assert itself without me having to force it. But watching him out there, receiving accolades for my work, I realized something cold and clarifying. The truth doesn't surface on its own. It stays buried until someone digs it up. Until someone decides that comfort matters less than honesty. My phone buzzed. A text from my business partner Jasmine. Your brother just told my husband he taught you everything you know about analytics. Want me to correct him? I stared at the message. Jasmine knew the truth. She'd been there from the beginning. She'd seen me build this company from my kitchen table. She'd watched me nearly break under the weight of my brother's increasing involvement. His insistence that we needed a public face. His argument that investors would take us more seriously if he handled the presentations while I focused on the technical stuff. I had agreed, not because I believed him, but because I was tired of fighting. Tired of his accusations that I was difficult, territorial, impossible to work with. Tired of our parents suggesting I was holding him back out of jealousy. Tired of being made to feel like wanting credit for my own work was somehow selfish. I typed back, not yet, but soon. Through the window, I watched my brother laugh at something my uncle said. He looked comfortable, confident, like he'd earned his place in that circle, like he belonged there more than I did. The study door opened behind me. I turned, expecting my mother or my aunt. Instead, my grandfather stood in the doorway. He was 83, sharp as ever, and had built his own business from nothing 50 years ago. Hiding? He asked. Thinking, I replied. He walked to the window and stood beside me. We watched the party together in silence. After a moment he said, Your brother tells a good story. I didn't respond. But stories aren't the same as truth, he continued. His voice was quiet but firm. I've been watching you both for a long time, watching how he talks and how you work. Watching who shows up to solve problems and who shows up to take credit. My throat tightened. He turned to face me. The question is, what are you gonna do about it? I looked at my grandfather. Really looked at him. His eyes were steady and knowing. He wasn't asking because he didn't know the answer. He was asking because he wanted me to say it out loud. I don't know, I admitted. He nodded slowly. That's honest. But let me tell you something I learned building my company. The people who do the work rarely get the glory. Not automatically. You have to claim it. And sometimes claiming it means making other people uncomfortable. My family will survive discomfort, he interrupted gently. What they won't survive is building a life on a lie. And what you won't survive is spending the rest of your life watching someone else live with your accomplishments. He patted my shoulder and left the study. I stood there alone with his words echoing in the quiet room. Outside, my brother had moved on to another group. More smiles, more handshakes, more congratulations for things he didn't do. I thought about every late night, every failed attempt, every small victory that led to the business we had now. I thought about the algorithm I'd designed, the clients I'd won, the team I'd built. I thought about how it felt to see my name buried in small print, while his was emblazoned across every piece of marketing material. Then I thought about my grandfather's question. What was I going to do about it? I opened my phone again and scrolled through the documents. Incorporation papers listing me as founder and CEO. Patent applications in my name. Email chains showing my brother asking basic questions about our own technology months after we'd launched. Client testimonials addressed to me. Financial records proving I'd funded the startup with my savings while he contributed nothing. The truth was documented. Time-stamped. Undeniable. All it needed was a voice. I walked back outside. The party had moved to the patio, where desserts were being served. My brother stood at the center of attention, now telling the story of our breakthrough moment. The moment was real. But he hadn't been there for it. He'd been in Miami on vacation, while I pulled 3 consecutive all-nighters fixing a critical bug that would have cost us our biggest contract. I didn't interrupt. Not yet. I simply stood at the edge of the gathering and waited. Eventually someone would ask me a question. Eventually someone would include me in the conversation. Eventually an opening would appear. It came 20 minutes later when my cousin asked me what role I played in the company. My brother answered before I could. She handles the back-end stuff. The technical work. She's brilliant with computers. Technical work was how he'd been describing my role for 2 years. It sounded important enough to justify my existence, but vague enough that no one asked follow-up questions. But this time, my cousin did. She turned to me directly. That must be complicated. What exactly do you do? I felt everyone's attention shift. My brother's smile tightened slightly. My mother looked nervous. My aunt took a small step closer as if preparing to intervene, and I made a choice. I built the company, I said clearly. The algorithm, the client base, the team, the strategy, all of it. The silence that followed was immediate and dense. My brother's laugh came out strained. We built it together. I handled the business side. No, I interrupted gently. You handle the presentations. There's a difference. My uncle frowned. I don't understand. I pulled out my phone. I have documentation if anyone's interested. My brother's face went pale. This isn't the time or place. Then when is? I asked. My voice remained calm, but something in my chest had unlocked. When is the appropriate time to tell the truth? My mother stepped forward. Sweetheart, let's not do this here. We can discuss this privately. Why privately? The question came from my grandfather. He'd been sitting quietly on a nearby bench. Now he stood. If the boy's been taking credit for work he didn't do, seems like the people congratulating him should know. My brother looked panicked. This is a misunderstanding. We're partners. Show them the incorporation papers, my grandfather said to me. Not a request, a directive. I pulled up the document on my phone. The official paperwork listing Morrison Analytics LLC, founder and CEO, Alexandra Morrison. My name, not his. My cousin took my phone and read it. Her eyebrows rose. She passed it to my uncle. He read it and went very still. My brother attempted damage control. The legal structure doesn't reflect the real contributions. I do all the client-facing work, the networking, show them the patent, my grandfather said. I showed them. The proprietary algorithm that made our software valuable. Inventor, Alexandra Morrison. Filed 2 years before my brother even knew what the company did. My brother's voice rose. This is ridiculous. You're making me look like a fraud in front of our entire family. Are you a fraud? My grandfather asked simply. The question hung in the air like smoke. My brother looked around for support. My mother was pale. My father had disappeared inside. My aunts and uncles exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one spoke. I contributed, my brother said finally. His voice had lost its confident edge. Maybe not technically, but I built the brand. I made the connections. You performed? I said quietly, while I built. The words landed with precision, because they were true, and everyone there knew it. My brother stared at me with a mixture of anger and something else. Fear, maybe, or the dawning realization that the story he'd been telling was about to collapse. We'll discuss this later, my mother said firmly. She placed herself between me and my brother like a referee. This is a family gathering. Let's not ruin it. It's already ruined, I said. Not cruelly, just factually. It was ruined the moment he lied about building something I created. I looked around at my family, at their uncomfortable faces and averted eyes, at the way they'd rather preserve peace than acknowledge truth. I'm going home, I said. I handed my phone to my cousin. If anyone wants to see more documentation, it's all there. Tax returns showing who funded the startup. Email chains showing who solved which problems. Client contracts with my signature. It's all documented. I walked toward the house to get my keys. Behind me, I heard my brother say my name. I didn't turn around. I heard my mother say we needed to calm down and be reasonable. I heard my grandfather say, let her go. She's been reasonable for too long. I drove away from that party with my hands steady on the wheel and my heart pounding in my chest. Not from anger, not from regret, from something clearer. Liberation. Maybe. Or just the simple relief of finally telling the truth out loud. The story didn't end there, though. It couldn't. Because truth, once spoken in a family like mine, doesn't dissipate quietly. It spreads like dye in water, touching everything. What I didn't know as I drove away from my uncle's estate was that my grandfather had kept my phone. He'd passed it around to every adult at that party. He'd made them read the documents. Made them see the timestamps, made them confront what they'd been too comfortable to question. I wouldn't learn about that until later. Much later, after everything else unfolded. But first, I need to go back. Back to where this really started. Because family betrayals don't begin at parties. They begin in small moments years earlier. Moments so subtle you don't recognize them as betrayals until you see the whole pattern. The first crack appeared 3 years ago, long before Morrison Analytics had a name or a business plan. Back when it was just an idea I was developing in my spare time while working a job I hated. I was 25, working as a data analyst for an insurance company in Hartford. The job was stable and soul-crushing in equal measure. I spent my days running reports that no one read and my nights teaching myself advanced programming languages. My brother Jason was 28, bouncing between sales jobs and opportunities that never quite materialized. He was charming and likable, but had never found something that stuck. Our parents worried about him constantly, worried he'd never settle down, worried he lacked direction, worried he'd end up 35 and aimless. I, on the other hand, never worried them. I was the responsible one, the stable one, the daughter who made sensible choices and paid her bills on time. They praised me for this sometimes, but mostly they just expected it. Stability doesn't get attention in families, it's just the baseline. One night, Jason came to my apartment. I was deep in code, trying to solve a data pattern recognition problem that had been bothering me for weeks. He brought pizza and beer and settled on my couch like he'd lived there. "What you working on?" he asked. I explained, probably in too much detail, that I was building an algorithm that could predict consumer behavior based on purchasing patterns. Not just what people bought, but when they were likely to buy it next. The implications for retail inventory management were huge. He listened with unusual focus. "Could you make money from this?" "Maybe eventually, right now it's just a project." "But if it worked, like really worked, businesses would pay for that, right?" "Theoretically." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "We should start a company." I laughed. "With what money?" "You have savings. Not enough to start a company, but enough to start, and I could," he waved his hand vaguely, "handle the business stuff, the selling. You're terrible at that." He wasn't wrong. I was terrible at self-promotion, terrible at networking, terrible at the confident presentation style that made investors open their checkbooks. "Let me think about it," I said. What I should have heard in that moment was the word, we. He'd said, "We should start a company," before I'd even decided to turn my project into a business. Before I'd agreed to anything. He'd assumed my work was something we'd share. But I didn't hear it. I was just excited someone believed in what I was building. Over the next few weeks, Jason became increasingly enthusiastic. He researched business structures and pitched me on LLC formation. He talked about our company and our product with such certainty that I started believing it too. Looking back, I can see how it happened, how I slowly handed over pieces of something that was mine. First the narrative, then the presentations, then the title of co-founder, even though he hadn't written a single line of code or contributed $1 of funding. I told myself it was partnership, that his skills complemented mine, that every company needed both the builder and the face. What I didn't see was that face was turning into founder in everyone's eyes, including his own. The real turning point came when we pitched our first potential investor, a venture capitalist in Boston who was interested in consumer analytics startups. I'd prepared a detailed presentation. I knew every number, every feature, every potential application. But when we walked into that office, Jason took the lead. He had the confident handshake, the easy laugh, the ability to make strangers feel like old friends. The investor responded to him immediately, and I let it happen. I sat there in my careful blazer with my laptop ready to demo the software, and I let my brother position himself as the visionary while I became the technical lead. We didn't get that investment, but the pattern was set. Over the next year, as Morrison Analytics slowly took shape, Jason's role expanded while mine seemed to contract. In reality, I was doing more work than ever, building the platform, debugging code, signing clients, managing the small team we eventually hired. But in the story Jason told to investors, to clients, to our family, he was the founder who'd had the vision, and I was the talented sister who helped him bring it to life. The first time I heard him tell that version, I felt something cold slide through my chest. We were at a networking event. Someone asked how he'd started the company. He said he'd been tinkering with some ideas about consumer data and had brought his sister on to handle the technical implementation. Tinkering. Brought on. Technical implementation. Every word was wrong. But correcting him in front of potential clients felt petty, difficult, territorial. So I stayed quiet, and quiet became complicit. By the time of the 4th of July party, Jason had told his version so many times he believed it. He genuinely seemed to think the company was his creation. That my contributions were important, but secondary. That success was something he'd achieved and generously shared. Our parents believed it too. Why wouldn't they? Jason had always been the one who needed building up. I'd always been fine on my own. It made sense to them that he'd finally found his calling, that he'd finally succeeded at something. They didn't ask uncomfortable questions, didn't wonder how someone with no technical background had designed complex software, didn't question why all the legal documents had my name. They wanted to believe their son was thriving. So they did. And I let them. Because challenging the narrative felt like destroying the family peace. Because making my brother look bad made me look petty. Because women who demand recognition for their work are often labeled as difficult, aggressive, attention-seeking. So I stayed in the background, did the work, built the company, and watched Jason collect the credit. Until that 4th of July, when standing in my uncle's backyard watching my brother accept congratulations for something he didn't build, I finally understood what my grandfather had meant. Some lies kill you slowly. And I was tired of dying. The days after the 4th of July party moved strangely, fast and slow at once. I went to work. I answered emails. I met with clients. Everything looked normal on the surface. But underneath, the foundation had shifted. My phone buzzed constantly. Family members reaching out with carefully worded messages. Cousins asking if I was okay. Aunts suggesting we talk through the misunderstanding. Uncles saying they had no idea there was confusion about roles. Confusion. Misunderstanding. Disagreement. No one used the word lie. Jason tried calling twice. I didn't answer. He sent a long text saying we needed to discuss things privately, that airing family business publicly was immature, that he was disappointed in my behavior. My behavior. Not his lies. My decision to tell the truth. My mother called on the 3rd day. Her voice had that tight, controlled quality she used when deeply upset but determined to sound reasonable. Honey, we need to fix this. Your brother is devastated. The family is uncomfortable. Everyone's taking sides. There aren't sides, Mom. There's just what happened. It's not that simple. Partnerships are complicated. Maybe you both have valid perspectives on how things developed. I have documents, timestamps, legal proof. This isn't about perspective. She was quiet for a moment. You're making your brother look terrible. I didn't make him anything. I just stopped pretending he built something he didn't. He contributed. You know he did. The networking, the presentations, are not the same as founding a company. Another pause, longer this time. Your grandfather is making this worse. He's telling everyone to look at those documents. He's turning the whole family against Jason. I felt a flicker of warmth toward my grandfather. He's telling them the truth. The truth is destroying your brother's reputation. Maybe his reputation was built on something that wasn't real. My mother's voice finally broke. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let him have this one thing? You've always been so accomplished, so self-sufficient. Can't you let your brother shine for once? The words landed like a slap. Let him have this one thing. As if my work was a toy I was refusing to share. Mom, he's not shining. He's lying. He's your brother. And I'm your daughter. The silence that followed felt enormous, like we'd both realized simultaneously that we were standing on different planets, looking at each other across a void. She said she had to go. She said she loved me. She said she hoped I'd reconsider before irreparable damage was done. I said I loved her too. Then I hung up and sat in my quiet apartment, wondering if choosing yourself is always this lonely. The next message that mattered came from my business partner, Jasmine. We'd met at a tech conference 2 years ago. She'd invested in Morrison Analytics early and eventually joined as COO. She knew every detail of how the company had actually developed. Her text was short. We need to talk. Can you come to my place? I drove to her house in West Hartford. She lived in a renovated Victorian with a huge back porch. We sat outside with iced tea while her kids played in the yard. I've been watching this unfold, she said carefully. I've been trying to decide whether to stay quiet or get involved. You don't have to get involved. This is family stuff. It's business stuff too, and I have information you need. I looked at her. Her expression was serious. What information? Jason's been talking to investors without you. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He's been pitching a Series B funding round, using projections and materials he didn't run by you. He's positioning himself as CEO and sole founder. The iced tea suddenly tasted bitter. That's not his position. I'm CEO. I know, but he's been telling potential investors that you're resistant to growth, that you're holding the company back with technical perfectionism, that he needs funding to expand beyond your limitations. I set down my glass carefully. When did this start? At least 3 months ago. I only found out last week when an investor friend called to ask about the company's leadership structure. He'd met with Jason twice. Didn't even know you existed. The betrayal was so complete I almost laughed. So the 4th of July thing, that wasn't about ego? It was groundwork. He's been rewriting history to investors so they'll fund his version of the company. A version where you're a skilled employee he might eventually need to replace. I felt my hands go cold. Can he do that? Legally? No. You're the majority shareholder and listed CEO. But he can make things messy, cast doubt, make it hard to raise capital, damage the company's reputation. I stared at her kids playing on the swing set, innocent and uncomplicated. What should I do? Document everything, lawyer up, and decide if you want to buy him out or force him out. He's my brother. I know. Her voice was gentle. But he's also trying to steal your company. I drove home in a daze. My brother wasn't just taking credit at family parties. He was actively working to erase me from the business I'd built. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I opened a document I'd created months earlier but never finished. A timeline of every contribution I'd made to Morrison Analytics. Every client I'd signed. Every feature I'd developed. Every crisis I'd solved. Next to it, I created a parallel column for Jason's contributions. The honest ones. He'd made some connections, attended some meetings, handled some administrative tasks. The 2 columns weren't even close. His contributions, while real, were a fraction of what built the company. I saved the document and made multiple backups. Then I called a lawyer. Not a family friend or someone who'd try to mediate. A real lawyer who specialized in business disputes. Her name was Patricia Chen. She had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. When I explained the situation over the phone, she said 4 words. Come in tomorrow morning. The next day, I sat in her downtown Hartford office and laid out everything. The documents, the incorporation papers, the emails from Jason asking technical questions that proved he didn't understand our own product, the investor meetings he'd taken without me. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. This is straightforward legally. You have overwhelming evidence of ownership. But family makes things complicated. What do you mean? Your brother could drag this out, make it public, hurt the company's reputation enough that even if you win, you lose. So what do I do? You give him one chance to come clean and step back voluntarily. If he refuses, you remove him from the company by whatever means necessary. My throat was tight. Remove him? He's a minority shareholder with no formal role. You can buy out his shares and terminate any informal arrangement. It'll be expensive and painful. But it's your company, not his. I left her office feeling lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because I had a path forward. Heavier because that path led through confrontation I'd spent my whole life avoiding. That evening, I drafted an email to Jason. Short and clear. We need to meet. Just us. Tomorrow at the office, 9 a.m. He responded within minutes. About time. See you there. The confidence in those 3 words told me he had no idea what was coming. I barely slept that night. I kept rehearsing what I'd say. Kept trying to find words that would be firm without being cruel. That would reclaim my work without destroying my brother. But every version I practiced felt inadequate. Because at the end of the day, what I needed to say was simple. This is mine. You lied. And I'm done allowing it. The next morning I arrived at our small office at 8:30. Morrison Analytics operated out of a renovated warehouse space in Hartford's downtown. We had 12 employees now. Most worked remotely, but we kept the office for meetings and focus work. I unlocked the door and sat at the conference table. The table where I'd coded the first version of our software. Where I'd celebrated our first paying client. Where I'd cried after 3 straight weeks of barely sleeping while solving a critical technical problem. Jason arrived at 9:15. Late, as always. He walked in with coffee and that easy smile. Like this was just another day. "Hey," he said. "Look, I know the 4th was weird. Mom's been freaking out. I think we just need to set the record straight with everyone." "I know about the investor meetings," I interrupted. His smile faltered slightly. "What investor meetings?" "The ones where you pitched Series B funding without telling me. Where you called yourself the sole founder. Where you said I was resistant to growth." He set down his coffee carefully. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" "It matters because someone's giving you misleading information." "Patricia Chen was here yesterday afternoon," I continued. "She's a lawyer. She specializes in business disputes. She's reviewed all my documentation. She says I have an overwhelming case." Jason's face went pale. "A case? Alex, we're brothers and sisters. We don't need lawyers. You tried to erase me from my own company." My voice stayed steady. "Not just in family stories, in business meetings, with people who could actually invest money based on lies you told them." "I never lied. I presented the business in the way that would get results. By removing me from the story. By positioning us strategically. Investors respond better to a single visionary than a partnership. It's not personal. It's business." "It's my business," I said quietly. "I built it. I funded it. I designed every piece of technology that makes it valuable, and you've been systematically trying to take it." He stood up abruptly. "This is insane. I've given 3 years to this company. I've made connections you never could have made. I've brought in clients." "Name them." "What?" "Name 3 clients you brought in yourself." He stared at me, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. "This isn't about numbers. Name 1 client, 1 single paying customer you signed without my work behind the pitch." The silence answered for him. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "These are your options. Option 1, you sign over your minority shares. I'll buy them out at fair market value. You walk away with money, and we release a joint statement about your departure. Option 2, I remove you from the company, and we go through discovery. Every email, every meeting, every lie you told becomes public record." Jason's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder. He read the documents. 2 minutes passed. 3. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "You'd really do this? Destroy your own brother?" "I'm not destroying you. I'm protecting what I built. The family will never forgive you. The family doesn't know the truth yet. They will." He stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. "I made you. You'd still be in that dead-end insurance job if I hadn't pushed you to start this company. You'd still be coding alone in your apartment going nowhere. I gave you courage. I gave you confidence. I made this happen." The words hung in the air, and I realized with a cold clarity that he actually believed them. "Jason," I said quietly, "you didn't make me. You just made me think I needed you." He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "This isn't over. You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "Maybe," I said. "But it's my life, my mistake, my choice." He slammed the door so hard the window rattled. I sat alone in the quiet office. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing. But underneath the adrenaline was something solid. Something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself. That afternoon, the fallout began in earnest. Jason called an emergency family meeting at my parents' house. Everyone was invited except me. My grandfather called me 3 hours later. "They're trying to gang up on you, painting you as red, vindictive. Your mother's crying. Your father's talking about therapy, and Jason's playing the victim perfectly." "Let them," I said. "I'm done trying to convince people who don't want to see the truth." "Good," he said, "because I'm about to blow up their little meeting." "Grandpa, you don't have to." "Oh, I very much do. I've been watching this family enable your brother for 30 years. Time somebody said it out loud." He hung up before I could respond. Later I learned what happened at that meeting. My grandfather showed up uninvited. He walked into my parents' living room where 15 family members had gathered to discuss the Alexandra problem. He stood at the front of the room and said 5 words. My granddaughter built the company. Then he pulled out printed copies of every document I'd shown him. The incorporation papers, the patent, the client contracts, the email chains. He passed them around the room like homework. I don't care what story you've been telling yourselves, he told them. I don't care how badly you want to believe Jason finally succeeded at something. The truth is right here on paper, and anyone who keeps lying about it is choosing delusion over reality. My mother tried to interrupt. He silenced her with a look. Alex has spent her whole life making you comfortable, making herself smaller so you could feel big. She's done asking permission to take up space, and anyone who has a problem with that can deal with me. Then he walked out. My cousin Emma called me that night. She was laughing and crying at once. Your grandfather just scorched the entire family. Half of them are furious. The other half are finally looking at those documents. Really looking. Mom just said she can't believe she didn't ask more questions. And Jason? He left, wouldn't talk to anyone. Your mom followed him out. Your dad's sitting alone in the living room looking shell-shocked. I felt bad about that. Not guilty, but sad. The whole family structure was built on comfortable lies. Removing one lie exposed them all. The next morning, Jason's lawyer called mine. He was willing to discuss terms. The negotiation took 3 weeks. It wasn't smooth. Jason tried multiple times to get more money, better terms, some public acknowledgement of his contributions. Patricia shut down each attempt with documentation. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon in late July, Jason signed the buyout agreement. He transferred his minority shares for $150,000 and signed an NDA preventing him from claiming involvement in founding the company. I wired the money that afternoon. Patricia filed the paperwork. By 5 p.m., Jason was officially removed from Morrison Analytics. I sat at my apartment that night and cried. Not from victory. Not from relief, just from the weight of it all. The loneliness of choosing yourself, the cost of truth, the sadness of watching family bonds break because they were never as strong as everyone pretended. But underneath the sadness was something else. Something quiet, but unshakable. Freedom. For the first time in 3 years, Morrison Analytics was fully mine. My name, my work, my company. No one to perform for. No one to accommodate. No one to make comfortable at the expense of my own truth. Just me. And that was enough. The months after Jason's departure moved like water finding its level. Fast in some places, slow in others, but always moving towards something more honest. The immediate aftermath was messy. Jason told people I'd forced him out of his own company. Some believed him. Some distant relatives stopped inviting me to gatherings. A few cousins sent messages, saying they were disappointed in how I'd handled things. But others reached out differently. My cousin Emma started asking real questions about my work. My Uncle Tom, who'd always been quiet, called to say he'd reviewed everything and was proud of me. Slowly, a new understanding spread through the family. Not universal, but growing. My parents struggled most. They wanted both children to be happy. They wanted peace. They wanted everyone to just get along. But getting along required someone to lie, and I was done being that someone. Eventually, 3 months after the buyout, my father called. I think I need to apologize, he said. His voice was rough, uncertain. Your mother and I, we didn't ask the right questions. We wanted to believe Jason had finally found his place. We didn't look too hard at how. I needed you to look, I said quietly. I needed someone to ask. I know. A long pause. I'm asking now. Tell me everything. So I did. For the first time, I told my father the whole story. Not defensively, not bitterly, just honestly. I told him about building the algorithm alone, about funding the startup with my own money, about Jason slowly taking credit for work he didn't do, about feeling invisible in my own company. When I finished, my father was quiet for a long time. I failed you, he said finally. I let you be the strong one, the one who didn't need help, and I never thought about how much that cost you. The apology was imperfect, but it was real. My mother took longer. She called 6 months after the buyout. By then, Morrison Analytics had raised Series B funding, with me as the sole founder and CEO. The validation felt good, but it would have felt better if I hadn't had to fight my own family to get there. Mom's call was short. She said she'd been thinking. She said she could see now how she'd prioritized Jason's feelings over my truth. She said she was sorry. I said thank you. I meant it. The real healing, though, came through work. Without Jason performing the role of founder, I stepped into it myself. Uncomfortably at first, then with growing confidence. I gave presentations, I pitched investors, I told the real story of how Morrison Analytics was built, and people listened. Because the story was real. Because competence, when finally visible, speaks for itself. By the end of the year, we doubled our client base, hired 10 more employees, expanded into 3 new markets. The company I'd built in secret was finally thriving in daylight. My grandfather came to the office one afternoon in December. He walked through the space slowly, taking it all in. When he reached my desk, he sat down in the guest chair. "You did good," he said simply. "Thanks to you." He shook his head. "I just held up a mirror. You're the one who decided to look." Before he left, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. "What's this?" "Investment. I should have done it years ago." I tried to hand it back. "Grandpa, you don't have to." "I know. I want to." His eyes were serious. "I spent my life building something. I want to invest in someone who actually built something too, not just talked about it." I took the check, not because I needed the money, because I needed him to see that his faith meant something. A year after the 4th of July party, my family had a reunion, smaller this time. My parents, my grandparents, a few aunts and uncles. No huge gathering, just the people willing to sit with discomfort long enough to find truth. Jason wasn't there. He'd moved to California, started working in sales again. Last I heard, he was doing well. We weren't in contact, but we weren't enemies either. Just 2 people who'd learned you can't build a relationship on lies. At dinner, my uncle raised a glass. "To Alex," he said, "who taught us that sometimes family means telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable." I looked around the table, at faces that had once looked away when my brother took credit, faces that had asked me to be quieter, smaller, easier. Now they were looking at me directly, seeing me, really seeing me. "To truth," I said. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was sitting at a table where I actually belonged. Later that night, sitting on my grandfather's porch, he asked me if I regretted it. All the discomfort, all the broken relationships, all the ugly family meetings. I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. "I regret how long it took me to tell the truth, but I don't regret telling it." He nodded, rocked slowly in his chair. "You know what I learned building my business? The people who matter will stay, and the ones who leave were never really there for you anyway." Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you feel honest. I laughed, because he was right. The discomfort of truth was still better than the comfort of lies. The company continued growing. By the 2nd year, Morrison Analytics was valued at $12 million. By the 3rd, we were negotiating acquisition offers. Not because I wanted to sell, but because the work I'd done was finally being recognized for what it was. Valuable. Real. Mine. Sometimes I think about that 4th of July party, about standing in my uncle's backyard watching my brother perform a version of success that had nothing to do with reality, about how close I came to walking away and letting the lie continue. But I didn't walk away. I stood my ground. And in doing so, I learned something important. You can love your family and still refuse to shrink for them. You can honor relationships and still honor yourself more. You can be the difficult one, the uncomfortable one, the one who ruins the peace, and still be the one telling the truth. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply say, "This is mine. I built it. And I'm done apologizing for existing." If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's okay to claim your work, to speak your truth, to stop making yourself small for people who want you smaller, let me tell you something clearly. It's not just okay. It's necessary. Tell me in the comments what you've built that someone tried to take from you, and where you're listening from today. Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing we can do is simply refuse to be erased.